I say thanks to the Higher Mind Band for doing that Korean Hetty song. Since I heard it, it has never left my mind. That little, like a guest house, let him in, love him, let him go. It is like the answer to a lot of things for me. And today's topic is about that very much. It's called Fearless Compassion. And I ran across a story that many of you probably have heard, and I'm only going to tell you part of it because it's the part that pertains to what we're talking about today. I've seen it all over the internet in various forms, but the thrust of it is that there's a couple who've been married for some years, and they have a child who's moving from middle school to high school. And their marriage is not troubled, but the husband's become bored, and so he has an affair with someone at work, and he comes home and tells his wife that he wants a divorce. And she's floored, of course, and asks him to wait till the next day, and she'll talk to him about it then. And the next morning, she gives him conditions. She says, okay, on these conditions, that we try to live as normally as possible for the next month until our son finishes the school year. And that every day you will carry me from the bedroom to the front door as you go to work. And he says, okay. And there are lots of other details to the story, but the thing I want to focus on is that over the course of the next month, as he picks her up and carries her, he finds compassion for her, and he finds compassion for himself, and he starts to realize who she is again, and he begins to appreciate her and rediscovers the reasons that he married her in the first place. And of course, the story ends with the man ending the affair and deciding to stay married. The message that was so important for me is that the compassion that the wife wielded so fearlessly changed the whole situation. And I think that's what happens. The fearless compassion that she brought to the situation, she could have done what any one of us might have done, which is to say, okay, get out of my sight, you rat, or to fall into grief and just cry, or to try to protect herself. Can you imagine what would have happened if he carried her with disgust or disdain for that whole month? How that would have hurt her? She was brave enough to say, these are my conditions. Pretty fearless stuff. Pretty fearless to find a way to feel deep compassion for herself and her child and her husband, and to feel the pain but see the bigger picture. That's fearless compassion. And she saw maybe what he would suffer by not being able to watch his son grow up. Maybe she saw the guilt that he would feel for leaving his family because he was bored. I don't know. Maybe she had no idea how it would turn out, but wanted to give him the chance to really think through what he was doing. I don't know. But regardless of why she did it, because she was open-hearted and courageous enough to do it, everything changed. And I think she was very wise, because she remembered something that I think is really true, but we don't often remember, and that is that compassion is who we are. It's what we are. It's part of our nature. Compassion is wired into us, body, mind, and soul. There used to be a man here. He moved to another university, but he used to be, I think, at Wright State. No, he's UD, and his specialty is compassion research. And there's a lot of it going on, and it's fascinating because apparently we are biologically hardwired for compassion the same way we're hardwired for that fight or flight response, and they're almost directly opposite. When we're afraid, of course, our heartbeat increases and we prepare to flee or fight. When we're sensing compassion from another or feeling it in ourselves, our heart rate slows down, and we're flooded with oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. We're prepared to approach and soothe. And it's the same kind of response that just sort of happens naturally in our bodies. And one of the really interesting experiments, I thought, was that they separated two people with a wall, so they couldn't see each other. But there was a little hole big enough for one person to reach through and touch the other. And they tried to determine what emotions could be picked up through touch alone. And most of them really couldn't, but compassion transmitted through just touch alone, without even seeing each other. the person on the other side, the one being touched, could recognize and receive and feel compassion coming from the other through touch. And amazingly enough, that happens in our close relatives too. The apes and the monkeys, they have a natural tendency to be compassionate to one another. The younger monkeys will go and get water for elderly monkeys who can't get around as well. And it seems that they can also communicate compassion simply by touching, which just blows me away. It's amazing, and it flies in the face of a lot of what we've been told about ourselves. That, the philosophers, many Western philosophers sort of deride compassion. They call it soft-heartedness. Immanuel Kant said that should never happen between people. That was a little harsh, but we hear a lot about that in our culture, how we're basically, selfish, and that even when we're compassionate, it's a selfish act. I don't buy it. I just don't believe it. I think that compassion is part of who we are in every part of ourselves. Physically, our bodies respond. Certainly mentally and absolutely spiritually. It's who we are because of who we are. We're manifestations of that creative, loving energy that caused everything to come into being, including us. And we've been talking for the last couple of weeks about the things that compassion flows directly from. Recognizing the divine in ourselves, recognizing the divine in other people, and bringing our innate creativity to bear on our engagement with ourselves and with others, so that we do it newly and freshly, free from our past prejudice and bias and compartmentalization of people. So we come to it fresh and new. And that means that compassion is not just being nice. There's this creative element to it. It's more than sympathy, and it's more than empathy, and it is recognizing through that creativity that what changes people, what changes us, is seeing and being seen honestly and deeply. Seeing and being seen changes us. When we can encounter reality, for lack of a better word, with a small r, reality, when we can encounter life with an open heart and remembering that creativity that we have, that's when we show up with this fearless compassion for each other and for ourselves and for all of life. That is something different. It is, it's not what I was taught, which was that it's compassionate to do what you think the other person wants you to do, or to say what you think the other person wants to hear. It's to be nice, make nice. That's not what compassion is. And it's not even sympathy. It's not empathy. It's something different. Sympathy is, I see your plight and I feel bad. Empathy is, I see your sorrow and I feel your sorrow. When you feel pain, I feel pain. When you feel confused, I feel confused. When you feel hurt, I feel hurt. Compassion means I see what you're suffering and I feel it, and it doesn't interfere with my circuits. It doesn't cause me to get involved in the same feelings and stuck in the same feeling. Compassion maintains that view that there's a bigger picture, if you will, that there's something above and beyond and behind all of the circumstances that is bigger. It doesn't overwhelm me. I can see it and I can feel it and I can still see that big picture. It is empathy plus objectivity, sort of all rolled into one with that kernel of divine creativity. The Rabbi Rami Shapiro, in the book The Sacred Art of Loving Kindness, uses an analogy of movies or television. When you really get into a TV program and you're there and you're feeling all the feelings and you're experiencing all the action and you're right there with the characters, and then there's a commercial break. So you get up and go to the kitchen and make a cup of tea, and you don't take all those feelings along with you. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like keeping that perspective so that we can be fully engaged in the feelings and interactions, but not stuck there. And as he points out in the reading, this shared suffering notion of compassion, what value is that if we're both stuck in the same pain at the end and we haven't done anything to alleviate it? It doesn't serve either one of us. So I started to think about compassion as wholeheartedness, having a whole heart that's open to and welcoming of the full range of emotion. And we let him in and we love him and we let him go, as the song said. And we don't have to act on any of the emotion because we still see this bigger picture. You know, like what the practitioners do when we can't do it for ourselves, with these people around here whose specialty is affirmative prayer, they could see the bigger picture when we sometimes get stuck in the earthly, the circumstantial, the facts. We get stuck there, and one of the practitioners can help us raise our view to that higher perspective so that we can see what's behind and underneath all of that. But when we can feel that whole range of emotion, that wholeheartedness, when we can feel fear and love and faith and joy and anger when another is feeling it, and ecstasy and guilt and game, guilt and shame, ecstasy, guilt and shame, there we go. When we can feel all of it without acting on it, what happens is we come to know each other's hearts. Come to know each other's hearts. And when we can feel it without acting on it or judging it as good or bad, then we know each other's open hearts. And that is the place that fearless compassion happens. And it lets us mirror for each other. You know, it doesn't do any good at all either if I come in and say, you have a problem, let me fix it. If I can come in and say, you're suffering, can I mirror to you? You can find your own answer, which honors the divine in you. At the same time, it allows that empathy and objectivity to happen. That's what compassion looks like for me. But that's not how I grew up. I mean, I grew up with people who thought that compassion meant deep anguish followed by telling the person what you thought they wanted to hear. Empathizing with their anguish, getting stuck in their anguish. And so my old behavior patterns nudge me in that direction. And when I need to talk about something difficult, I just kind of, in the past, have just frozen. When I have to tell somebody something, maybe that their behavior doesn't serve the situation or anything like that, it's really hard for me to do because I decided something they don't want to hear. I decide that. I don't ask them, I just make that determination. I'm sure they don't want to hear it, so I make these conversations much harder than they have to be. And sometimes in the past I've tried to mealy mouth my way around them, and then you do that long enough and the situation all of a sudden is so big that it just explodes all over everybody and nothing good happens. One time I remember I had to talk to a person that I directly supervised, and we had to either address some issues or we had to end the relationship, meaning I was staying and she was not. And I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And I really wanted to be compassionate, which really meant I wanted to tell her what I thought she wanted to hear. So I would schedule an appointment and she wouldn't show up. And I'd schedule another appointment and she wouldn't show up. And I'd schedule another appointment and she wouldn't show up. And what I probably should have done is stop and consider, maybe she was feeling the same fear I was. And maybe I should say, I'm going to make one more appointment, and it's really important that you be there, because you're not showing up as part of what we have to talk about. I didn't. I made one more appointment, and she didn't show up, so I called her and I said, you're fired, because she didn't show up for these appointments. And it didn't feel good to me, and I'm sure it didn't feel good to her either, and I never got to any of the underlying issues, because I realized that what I was really doing was not being compassionate to her at all. It was protecting myself. I was protecting my fear. My fear of showing up and being honest and open-hearted, and maybe feeling some anxiety, maybe feeling some pain. But I didn't realize that until long after the fact. And I did learn from it, but then I did it again. And then I did it again. I figure I have to learn it really thoroughly. Sometimes that's the case, right? Sometimes I just, you just have to learn what you have to learn. But I finally, something opened up my heart a little bit, and I started to realize that when somebody doesn't tell me what they want to say, but tells me what they think I want to hear, I feel manipulated. That means when I tell someone what I think they want to hear, they probably feel manipulated too. So I'm being manipulative, not compassionate. What I'm protecting is me and my fear and my inability to open my heart wide enough. I'm making it easier for me. That has nothing to do with compassion. That's fear. So if compassion, this is what was my thinking process after, smacking my head against the wall a couple of times. If compassion is who we are, mind, body, and spirit, it's created into us. It's created into us by that same creator, whatever name you choose to call it, God, the universe, intelligence, life, that created everything. And so we're called upon to exercise that bigger compassion that our Creator would exercise, which means to know our own hearts without bounds, without limitations, to know our own hearts and to be able to open to another's heart and let all those feelings in and love them and then let them go. Let them go without holding on to them, without attaching to them, without becoming enmeshed and mired down by them. It means, I think, having the courage to call ourselves on our own stuff and the courage to call another on their stuff when it's appropriate. Because sometimes that's what compassion really is. To say, it's not serving you or me or anyone when you don't show up for appointments. It doesn't serve anyone when, you sort of take control of these people rather than helping them find their own answer, which is the job she was supposed to be doing. When we have enough courage to call ourselves and others on the behavior that hurts, or mirror it to ourselves or another, that their behavior is hurtful. One of the little pieces in the book that the rabbi points out is that in Hebrew, the love of God, the love that God has for creation is ahava rabbah, infinite, unbounded. Ahava rabbah. It is something that can't be earned, it can't be lost, it can only be ignored. And it's that kind of love that's the basis of fearless compassion, I think. That love that is unconditional, and it lets us see the other and not judge, but simply see and feel and open to the other, know the other's heart. And yet maintain that bigger picture, that focus on the inner perfection that's there, no matter what the other person is feeling, no matter what the other person is talking about or stuck on or experiencing. And when we can act from that kind of boundless love, we are in fearless compassion. And it's the same kind of idea that appears in Buddhist metta practice. Buddhist metta practice is about feeling the other's difficulty and hoping and praying and wishing and affirming that they not suffer anymore. It is an idea that we're open to everything, while we never lose touch with that within that's perfect, the Buddha nature. And when we stay in touch with that inner nature, then we can come back to the world. We can be in the world and still be loving, and still be open-hearted, and still be willing to feel it all. We don't need to fear anything, because there's the wholeness that can't be damaged. It can't be lost. No uncertainty or change or pain messes with our Buddha nature. It is inviolate. And like I said, that's what we do in affirmative prayer, that we call spiritual mind treatment. We treat our minds to the truths that even though there's stuff, circumstances and facts, there's a bigger picture that comes from that divine spark of life within us, that comes from knowing that there is a power in the universe that's greater than we are, and it's always on our side. It's not doing anything to us. It's always supporting us. And that lets us keep that objectivity at the same time we have the empathy and the love. We cannot ignore the circumstances. We can't ignore the pain. We can't ignore the hurt. We can't ignore the joy and the elation that we're feeling or that others are feeling, because that's what it means to be human, to have those feelings. And at the same time, it means, since we are human, divine beings having a human experience, it also means we have to maintain that higher watch so that we don't forget that the circumstances are only part of our experience, and that there's something bigger and that something eternal in us. So when we forget this ability to see and not get trapped, to feel and not attach, we can't act out of loving kindness, because we get stuck. We just get stuck in the mire. And I don't know, it seems to me that once we're mired in those painful feelings, everything we do seems to perpetuate them. We take actions that perpetuate the suffering. But when we can just get out of the quicksand for a second and take a look at the bigger picture, then we can act in ways that kind of reduce the drama factor and bring that infinite love, that ahava rabba, to bear on the situation. And that changes everything. So we just let it in, and we love it, and we let it go. And we just keep doing that so that our heart is a constant flow of knowing others' hearts and knowing our own hearts well enough to remember that, we can feel things that we don't want to feel, or we don't particularly enjoy feeling. We can also feel things that are absolutely elation. And behind all of that, there is this eternal, changeless, boundless, loving source that we live from. That's what returns us to the world, that also keeps us rooted in our own integrity. And then we can engage life completely and well, skillfully, from the very divine nature that created us. So that completely, mind, body, and soul, we can enter into life and do what we came here to do and be what we came here to be. Fearless compassion. So I invite you to just take this idea of being fully open-hearted human, experiencing, while maintaining this perspective of that the Buddha nature, the divine nature, that is all of what we are. Take it deep into yourself as we pray together, as we remember that there is something in the universe that flared it into being in the beginning. Something that created all of the stars and the galaxies and the planets, and continues daily, moment by moment, to create stars and planets and galaxies and space and time and life and being, and yet can so skillfully and tenderly give birth to a baby or a kitten or a flower or a leaf or a raindrop, that can so skillfully maintain atoms in their construction, molecules in their combinations, and tissues and organs and air and empty space, and all of it in absolute perfection. There is this power of intelligence and life and creativity that exists in and as each one of us. It is always there for us, always supporting us, always providing us exactly what we need to find that courage, to find that open-heartedness, to find that divine creativity that lets us know each other's hearts in a new way, without judgment, without prejudice, without bias, without preconception, but as a new thing, moment by moment by moment. And I know for each one of us that we simply rest in that Buddha nature, that divinity within, that infinite perspective as we go forth to shine more brightly, to experience life more fully, more completely, to courageously find that unconditional, boundless, eternal love for each other and for all the world. And I simply know this is the truth of who we are, and so I say thank you. I say thank you for life itself, this whole amazing adventure, and for this community of brilliant souls that shine, that give themselves so freely to this world, that lift one another up, and so lift up everyone. And for this moment and this time together of celebration and remembering, I just say thank you. And I release these words knowing that my word never comes back to me void, because the universe always says yes in some way. Sometimes I can't recognize it until I really look. But in some way the universe is always saying yes to me. What an amazing realization. And so in gratitude I simply let this be, and we acknowledge it and affirm it together by saying, so it is.
Let's go ahead and sing together, I am remembering. I am remembering who I am. I am remembering who I am. I am remembering. I am remembering. I am remembering who I am. I am remembering who I am. I am remembering. I am remembering. I am remembering who I am. I am remembering who I am.
Remember it every moment. And now we have the opportunity to invest in the health of our spiritual community and in our own spiritual growth and development through the spiritual practice of giving. Your contributions allow us to be here for each week for you and for all those who are looking for a community like this one, as we have been for 67 years this year. And so we provide the blessing of support and encouragement and community that only happens when we come together. And so I want to thank you for allowing that to happen. And so please take your gift in your hands or your heart in love and in joy. And let's remember together, my gift goes forth to bless and to prosper.
My gift goes forth to bless and to prosper.
It does its good and perfect work.
It does its good and perfect work.
And returns to me multiplied abundantly.
And returns to me multiplied abundantly.
I am grateful.
I am grateful.
So it is.